There's nothing like League. And this is the Betfred Super League. No! Got me here. It took a big chunk out of me. Bleeding. It's bleeding. Oh no, it's bleeding. The thing just ripped my ear off. What do you think?
Hello again, everyone, and welcome along to another half hour or so of Rugby League chat in this latest edition of Eddie and Stevo, the podcast. We're here, as always, with the blessing and support of the game's major sponsors, Betfred. First of all, we need to catch up with Stevo and hear what he has to say about the double-header of games between England and France. The women and the men played at the weekend at Warrington. It was a welcome break for the Super League clubs, of course, after 10 rounds of gruelling games, a chance to refresh and patch up any injuries for them. And to be fair, it was a memorable occasion too for the MND Association. The great Rob Burrow was there, and his 3 children delivered the match ball for the men's game. Replica jersey sales raised £20,000 for the charity. So a very well done to everyone involved. But Stevo, in terms of the games that we saw, what did you make of it all? Because both England teams absolutely swamped the French. 64-0 wins in both for the English men and women. They certainly turned on the style.
They sure did. Congratulations to both of them. I'm pleased by the fact that the England coach decided to pick so many young kids. A few of the guys that didn't want to play, whether it by injury or whatever, they're going to be behind the 8 ball now. They're not going to get the opportunity. And it's little wonder that Sean Wayne said, I am happy. Of course he's happy with a scoreline like that, which was against, let's face it, we've got to be honest, it was a second-rate France outfit. There was very few stars appearing for the French. I was disappointed with that. I mean, we talk about the women's game at Twickenham, Rugby Union, 58,000 turned up. Now, that's going to be a wake-up call. We've got to get something sorted out with that. It's not going to be easy. We're always being classed as a northern game. But apart from that, those youngsters that came out on the weekend, they proved one thing to me, that there's a lot of stardom to come before we go for the World Cup in France.
Well, there's no doubt about that. But the thing is, Sean Wayne didn't really have too many options, did he? Because he named a squad of 40. 15 dropped out before they all got into camp. I know that there was a whole host of French players as well who dropped out from the Catalan Dragons and Toulouse. So we shouldn't get too carried away, should we? But to be fair, you can only beat what's in front of you.
I enjoyed it. And obviously Sean Wayne enjoyed it as well. I mean, the interviews afterwards, it wasn't a downer. He didn't say anything about that the French were poor. We created some really, really good tries. And, the new captain, he was outstanding. He has been all this season. And, Warrington's got probably the best player in Super League at this point in time. And I was overjoyed by the way that they scored the tries. The combination, the forward set up very, very well indeed. But a lot of people were saying, well, who do you think was the star? I'll tell you who my star was, and he was the hooker, Walker. He created more chances in that game than what we saw from the hookers in the World Cup past. And that's what we need. We need someone that can go forward from the dummy half. We didn't have that in the World Cup, and that was probably one of our negatives. But this Walker absolutely stunned everybody. He's got to be selected on a full-time basis all the way up to the World Cup. He was outstanding, Eddie.
Yes, he was. And as I say, there's some great tries scored. We had the hat-trick from George Williams. We had a hat-trick from Ash Hanley as well. 64-0, both the men and the women won. So a special mention also for Leah Burke of St Helens. She got 4 tries in the England women's match. How can we make the French more competitive, Stevo? And indeed, should we persist with this mid-season international? I suppose we have to, if Sean Wayne has got any chance at all of taking a team and being successful in the next World Cup in France in 2025.
I was watching an interview with Tony Smith. What that man was talking about was absolutely spot on. We have to work at the lower situation. Amateurs, we've got to support. Under 23s, under 19s, we've got to try to get all these young kids coming from the amateur basis, not just being picked out by the top clubs like Wigan, St Helens, Leeds, etc. We've got to make sure that we have the proper coaches, have the proper understanding of where we need to be, how we can go forward in our game. And I'm afraid we do not have that at this point in time. And I was in awe of Tony Smith. I respect him for what he's done in Rugby League, and I respected him even more for what he came out with in that interview before the international games. Listen to him, or even listen to you, Eddie.
I don't think they need to listen to me. They should listen to Tony Smith, you're right, because he called on the game at all levels to get behind the national sides. He wants, as you say, under 21s, under 23s, academy international matches to help. He says that we in this country should help the French to develop. The clubs, of course, will have to buy in to all that. There's no question about that. And they don't really seem willing to back the international test teams with so many players being withdrawn by them last week.
To go and play Australia and to go and play New Zealand was something beyond belief. And every youngster playing football or cricket or whatever, they want to play in an Ashes series. They want to play against the best in the world. And you can't deny that Australia are the best.
And just looking a bit deeper into it, Stevo, when we talk about international matches, what is the alternative? We've had the Combined Nations All-Stars from British-based clubs in the Super League. There's Ireland, Scotland and Wales. I don't think they would really offer any stiffer opposition than the French do. You've talked about the county championship. There is an academy War of the Roses taking place as we speak. The first of 3 games was played this last weekend, Lancashire against Yorkshire. So it's all sort of part and parcel of the stepping stone to the big prize at the end of the rainbow. But what is the alternative? How can we get, without offering hundreds of thousands of pounds to French Rugby League and players to French Rugby League clubs, how do we get better contested international matches than we get now?
Well, the more games you play, the better. I would certainly bring back the county championship, not just when I was playing, but many seasons before and many seasons after. The stepping stone for being selected for Great Britain was you performed at the county level. And if you performed there, you had a good chance of being selected. Now, in many ways, a lot of fans would say, well, it was a farce at Warrington. You know, the French, half the team, we didn't even know who they were or what they were. Were they really fully internationals? The only positive about it is it's given these young kids to play for England the incentive now to really go for it, get into it. Look, Williams is a star player that we've got now in Super League, without doubt. And he showed his quality and his class. Not only that, he showed a lot of maturity in regarding becoming a new captain. To be a captain, it's a lot to take on board. And it was outstanding. And it's not surprising that we have this opportunity. Now, there's only one way we can do that, is more competitions. And, of course, don't be jealous about the fact that France want to be improved as well. There was a few people who were involved with I think it was a Huddersfield, shall we say, gentleman, who suggested that it was a waste of time and it was wrong to support the French. Stop being jealous. Let's try to get our game go upwards, not backwards.
Okay, so we're talking about England, and we can do that because we've got the strength in depth. We've got the junior players coming through now, as they have proved. What we saw on Saturday was probably the equivalent of England Knights against French Knights, which will happen in the European Championships later this year. But how do we help France? How can we help the French? Catalan are in, Toulouse have been in, and might come back to Super League again in the near future. Below that, it's all part-time stuff. How do we help the French to be more competitive, to aid us to be more competitive when we play in a World Cup?
Well, first of all, we've got to look at our amateur game, both here and in France. Now, the south of France is where most of the Rugby League is played. We know that. But let's just push away this jealousy that we have. Why should we have French teams playing? To my opinion, Toulouse should not have been relegated. Toulouse should have been given the same opportunity that Catalan had. So why did they change that? They want to spread the gospel, but they're not prepared to give them the opportunity. Remember when Catalan came in, they didn't get relegated. So why change it?
Well, if we hadn't given them the chance to build for a couple of years, we wouldn't have the Catalan Dragons side that we've got now. There's no doubt about that.
And precisely, Eddie, we've got to look at ourselves. Have a look inside of what's happening. Evidently, we've got this IMG sort of situation. Have they looked at it? Have they tried to say that we should support France?
Well, of course, this is all rumour and conjecture what IMG might be talking about. We simply don't know. Nobody knows yet exactly.
Yeah, but Eddie, let me stop you there, all right? They should be letting us know. We're fans. We want to see this. We want to see improvement. But all we get is suggestions. Oh, we had a meeting and this is what they're doing. You can understand why a lot of fans are saying, I'm confused.
Well, I'm as confused as you are about all that as well. The other thing that confuses me as well, you mentioned the 58,000 who turned up at Twickenham on Saturday for the Women's Rugby Union Six Nations decider against the French. We got 8,500 at Warrington or thereabouts for our full international. Now, this is another concern because apart from World Cups, which, the World Cup last year was pretty well attended, and dare I say it, that Ashes series, if we ever get one back again, International Rugby League doesn't really capture the imagination of the public anymore. And can we get Australia and New Zealand, Stevo, to get their heads out of the sand and give us a chance?
They don't want to get their head out of the sand, Eddie, because they control it. It's like any business. It's like any person in business that runs their own company. If we're better than another company, we don't want to help them. Oh, listen, we want to be the best and we'll stay the best. And we've got to a situation now where the most valuable thing that we had in our game since 1895 was taking on Australian tours, for taking in the Kangaroos coming to this country. And we've allowed that to slip away. A lot of the Australians said, I'd rather watch, the State of Origin series. Because they built it up. They built it up. They copied. They said, how can we get more games that will intensify us and prepare us for international games? And they came up with the State of Origin. And it was just a copy of our county championship.
One good piece of news. They must have been listening to our podcast last week, Stevo, because the Tongans are coming at the end of the year for a 3-test series. That has now been confirmed. They're moving ahead. Who knows? Samoa, maybe. And maybe the Aussies, maybe the Kiwis will come in years to come. But the Tongan test series, this is music to the ears of Sean Wayne, I am sure.
And it's music to the ears of me. Because at long last, we've got a 3-match series. Something that's important. The Australians came over on a regular basis. The Kiwis came over on a regular basis. We loved it. It was the ultimate to play against the Kiwis and the Australians, etc., and so forth. We saw that in the World Cup. There was a glimmer of hope about the World Cup. All right, we should have made it to the final. We know that. And if we'd have beaten Australia in the final, then maybe a few people would have sat up. And you know the people that I'm talking about, Eddie? I'm talking about the media. I am talking about especially the newspapers.
No, it's a shame. There's no doubt about that. The media does seem to turn its back on rugby league, unless, Stevo, unless there's a scandal. Then we make page leads, not in the back, further towards the front.
And that's the attitude that we've got. Look, Maurice Lindsay, when he became the boss of the RFL, but there was one thing that he did. He used to go down to London and make sure, he used to knock on the door, the Guardian, the Times, the Sun, the Mirror. He would say, listen, you are not writing anything about rugby league. Why is that? Do we have anybody that's doing that now? Do we have anybody that's banging the drum down in London? Obviously not.
Well, good news today. A report's come out saying that Germany is aiming to qualify for a first ever World Cup in 2025, following in the path of Greece and Jamaica last year. Now, Andy Hay, remember him, the former Leeds, Castleford and Sheffield player, former Featherstone Rovers coach. He is now Rugby League Deutschland's performance director, and he is going to call on players with German heritage to help him out. So there are, there are the green shoots of interest in other parts of the world.
Well, they did it in Australia, didn't they?
Well, that's why we've got Tonga and Samoa, Western, and Papua New Guinea, for instance. Now, big names on the international stage. Precisely,
and also they took the gamble. They went down into Melbourne, Eddie, Aussie rules area. I mean, it's like a religion down in Melbourne, and yet we created a team. They took a gamble, Eddie. They took a gamble, but they also had one thing, and I hate to keep saying it. They had the backing of the money, the sponsors, to be able to do that. And once again, if you're asking for a company or people to invest into a new team, that's great, providing in Australia you don't get relegated. So in other words, if a company comes in and says, right, I'll put in 2.5 million, etc. and so forth, it'll probably take us 4 to 5 years, maybe 5 years to get it all sorted out. We've seen that with the new team in Dolphins this year. They've allowed them to it. But there's no risk of you having that investment just thrown away because you've been relegated to a lower division. Now, that's the one thing that the IMG are doing. I've said it all the time. IMG are trying to copy what's happening in Australia. No relegation, no promotion. Give them the chance to become, right, you've got to get this right, crowd right. On paper, it sounds great, but it's going to be difficult to achieve it.
Well, I know a man who lives in London now. I'm talking to him on this podcast. Would you be willing, if the Rugby League came to you and said, go down and talk to, well, it's not Fleet Street anymore, but go down and talk to all the sports editors of the national press. Would you be willing to go and bang on the door and tell them and spread the word?
Of course I would. I'd have to wear a helmet, and I'd have to wear boxing gloves, and I probably wouldn't be able to get through the front door. But at least if they said to me, right, you're going to be the media sort of bloke that's going to try to open the door, and I reckon that if you keep banging on the door long enough, it might open.
You never know. You never know. Well, let's see if anyone takes you up on that offer.
And before you go any further, Eddie, I'm not so sure that the RFL could afford me.
Well, I was going to say that. We haven't got down to talking about the pound, shillings and pence. But look,
but listen, on the face of it, of course I would. Listen, I'm the man that opened a museum about the game. And did I get any help from the RFL? No. I had to do it on my own. I had to finance it on my own. And yet I'm still wanting to have that collection. And yet they won't open at the George Hotel. They said yes. The council said, yeah, we'll put it back in the, and now they're reneged on that. If anything, Eddie, I should turn around and say, well, Rugby League's really not helped me in regards to trying to get a museum going, which I did. I got it going for 9 years.
I know you did. And there was some
Didn't get-
fantastic stuff in it as well.
Yeah, I didn't get a penny from the RFL.
Well, look, you're the man, obviously, who can beat the drum. And talking of beating the drum, the road to Wembley begins in earnest shortly for the Challenge Cup final. Super League teams have now entered the race, and there are some tasty games coming up. But talking of Wembley, the stadium has celebrated 100 years in existence this last week. And the stadium produced a collage of 100 great names who've appeared in their stadium from sport and entertainment. Now, Rugby League has been a major part of the stadium's history, as we know. The first cup final way back in 1929. But surprise, surprise, not one of the 100 icons they have named came from our game. What a disappointment and what a kick in the teeth.
It's disgraceful. 1929. Wigan versus Dewsbury. They started the tradition at the Twin Towers, as it was there. It's a wonderful weekend away. We all love it. We've had great times there. We've broadcast from there many, many times, Eddie. And for the people who have organised this 100 legends, they should be ashamed. I have got no quarrel about who they've selected. Spice Girls, Elton John, they've all appeared there. But what about the likes of Sean Edwards? Was it 8 times he appeared there?
I don't think he ever lost in a Challenge Cup final, did he, for Wigan? I don't think he did.
Well, he didn't for Wigan. He did for the London Broncos.
The Broncos, yes, he did.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is Spice Girls maybe 4 or 5 times. Elton John 3 or 4 times. Not that I've got any qualms about it. These are international stars from all over the world, etc. and so forth. But they've just look. We have a statue outside it.
I know. I was going to mention that. We've got Eric Ashton, Billy Boston, Alex Murphy, Martin Afire, Gus Risman, all immortalised outside that stadium. I can't understand why we don't rate a mention in the celebration of this centenary. I really can't.
Well, you and I didn't know that they were doing this. So maybe there's an excuse that the RFL had no idea of doing this. How on earth, from 1929, they've had a few boxing matches there. They've had this, that and the other. We've been there. I mean, I get so upset in regards to the fact all you got to do is have a little walk out the front of Wembley, and we've got a statue to our game.
I know. Who would be your Wembley icon, Stevo, by the way? Just looking back, you're already a self-confessed great historian of the game. Who would you select? I mean, there are dozens of... You've mentioned Sean Edwards. There are dozens of them. Martin Afire, those great tries that he scored. Fantastic achievements there. But who would be the one that we should have more than one in this collage. But who would be the one if they came to you and said, OK, clever clogs, who should we put in?
Well, there's 3 that just shout out to me. Alex Murphy, Eric Ashton and Billy Boston.
Well, they're there. They're there on the statue.
But they're not on the mural, are they? In other words, they can have a statue put there, which I might add was paid for by the people who are Rugby League people. That I do know. And yet they don't classify any of our players as to become a legend. It's an absolute disgrace.
I hope somebody's listening. I hope somebody will take heed of everything that you are saying here. We're back to the bread and butter of the Super League this weekend, Stevo. Wigan, the new leaders, they go to Hull on Thursday night, and we'll see the Catalan Dragons against St Helens live from Perpignan on Friday evening. 2 cracker games, these, for the television audience. We can wonder at all the games that are going to be played. As I say, Wigan going to Hull. That's going to be a test for Hull, isn't it? Tony Smith, all right, sitting in the television studio and saying what should be done at national level. They got a win against Huddersfield a couple of weeks ago. They ended the rout. They stopped it a bit, stopped the problem. I wonder if he can get a win against Wigan.
Well, it's certainly got the credentials to make sure that that happens. But he's got the credentials. But you've got to dig deep into the fact. I think you mentioned a couple of weeks ago, Eddie, that isn't there 19 or 20 players that are coming off contract at the end of this year?
Yes.
Now, if that's the case, and a lot of the players are thinking about, will I get another contract? Will I extend for 2 years, 1 year, or whatever? You know, that can run deep amongst the players. Now, I'm not saying that's the reason why they've been poor this season, but that could be one of the reasons, not all of the reasons. And I can assure you that they can't take it too lightly. You know, they go to Hull. It's always been a difficult place to play until this season. They just don't seem to be clicking. I'll put it that way. Now, Tony Smith, a great, great coach. You've only got to look at his record. Maybe it's not just Tony Smith's fault. Maybe it's a few of the players not putting, maybe wanting to play as much as they did in the past. That's only a suggestion.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out. And, of course, Hull and Wigan, mentioned Wembley, the 1985 Challenge Cup final, one of the greatest that Wembley has ever seen. It was a fantastic day, that one, 1985, and there's another reason why we should be remembered in the Wembley collage. But, of course, Stevo, it's a massive week coming up. This time next week, the King will be officially crowned, the coronation on Saturday. Now, which seat have you been allocated in the Abbey? I'm sure you've got your invitation, haven't you?
It must have got lost in the post somewhat. Look, I think it's fantastic. I'm a royalist. I always will be. I think that it makes so much money for our country. When anybody comes to London from overseas, they come to see the royalty. And it's not because of the architecture. It's because we have a royal family. And we should be proud of it.
Absolutely.
And I'll be waving my little flag. Don't worry about that.
It doesn't surprise me one iota. But talking of the coronation, you can have next week off, Stevo, because I have been talking to one of the greatest rugby league fans you could ever wish to meet, from deep in the heart of Westminster. The Right Honourable Sir Lindsay Hoyle. I've caught up with him. I've got a lovely interview with him, and there's some smashing lines in there from Lindsay, believe me. And we will have that on the podcast this time next week. So you take the week off, you wave your flag, you swear allegiance to the King, and when it's all over and done with, we'll talk again. How's that?
Well, I'll tell you how that looks like I'm playing reserve grade next week.
Not a bad man to play reserve grade too, Stevo. The Speaker of the House of Commons.
Hey, listen, I'll be one of the millions that will be watching the ceremony, and I will enjoy it. I shall, I think they're bringing out a coronation beer.
Now then.
I hope they do, because I'll be having more than one or two.
I'm sure you will. But you just be careful, take care of yourself, and we'll talk next time, okay?
You've kicked me into touch. Oh, well. See you in a fortnight. Bye.
Cheers.